don't know if it's the warmth, the gentle rocking motion, or the subtle perfume of city life, but these days a journey by public transport has me dreaming of being somewhere else. In my fantasy, the train carries me to a land that time has forgotten, where things are just a little bit old-fashioned, more sedate. I drift through a green and pleasant landscape, and instead of petrol fumes and body odour, I can smell the sea. Is it a dream? No, it's the Isle of Wight. The island is that land that time forgot, and for a transport buff like me, the island is a goldmine or sanatorium of nostalgia. No sooner have you got off the ferry than you're aboard antique London Underground trains, running above ground. It's an electromagnet to transport enthusiasts like train driver John Little. He left the big trains on the mainland to cram himself into the 1938 vintage driving seat. The cab seems incredibly small. Are tube trains still like this?
I think they're a little bit more ergonomically. Ergonomics is better, I think. I don't know. When I first come from the mainland to here, I thought, oh, wow, it's very small, yeah. I've got a bigger sort of fitted wardrobe at home than this.
Some of the trains have an eye-catching Jurassic paint job. According to Mr. Little, they're not the only prehistoric things down here.
It's a nice place to live. You get some narrow minds sometimes, which you just tolerate, really. There's people on the island who've never moved off the island or sort of seen what's over the horizon, which is quite incredible. I mean, some of my colleagues say, or often said, you must get bored over there, but I think no, because once you sort of drive a route, it might be from King's Cross to Newcastle, you sort of get not bored with the route, you get familiar with the route, and I get familiar with this, and I do miss the main line a lot. I've always missed the main line since I've been over here, because I do like speed.
The old trains cover 8.5 miles of track at a sedate 40 miles an hour. Anything else would be unseemly. Islanders travel in trains like this, antiquated machines with a certain charm that I suppose reflect the old-fashioned nature of the island itself. These trains came here from the late 1960s, and the track had to be specially electrified for them. But that was a small price to pay. The important thing was the ex-tube trains weren't very tall, so they'd fit under bridges and through tunnels built for a much earlier railway. The island once boasted a full-time steam line. The place is only 22 miles by 13, but they had a remarkable 54-mile network serving coastal and inland towns. But you know the rest of the story. By the late 1950s, the money rolling in wasn't enough to keep trains rolling out across an island where the population of red squirrels outnumbers that of people. And bit by bit, and rather stealthily, the lines were ripped up. The Island Line is the lost commuter section, but one small railway clings on, keeping the fireboxes burning and the steam at maximum pressure. This is the Isle of Wight Steam Railway, a great example of a classic British old-school line that defies the lessons of history and, of course, economics by refusing to die. This utterly charming, if incredibly greasy old girl was born in Brighton in 1878 when Queen Victoria still had a wasp waist. Now, remarkably, she was still running with her sisters on mainline railway duties right up until the mid-1960s. Today she's pulling carriages again, though, all thanks, of course, as usual, to the efforts of volunteers. Enthusiasts like Kim Chalky. These days he dresses up as a Victorian guard for the tourists, but like so many who give up their spare time to work here, he remembers the last days of the real railway. Kim, when did the steam train stop running here originally?
In 1966. Yeah.
And there was was there a campaign amongst local people to get the steam railway going again?
Oh yes. Nobody wanted to lose their railway. In fact, the old lady in the cottage up here, she was so against it, she wouldn't go by the bus. She would walk in to ride rather than get the bus.
And what about today, Kim? What sort of people use the railway today?
It's everybody. It's a holiday industry, and you get every sort of person here, Yeah, we call them anoraks.
What about the younger generation? Now, what's the attraction of steam to them?
The younger generation, we've got to thank, I think, Thomas the Tank. Because they get enthralled with Thomas the Tank, and what do they say? Well, why don't we go and see Thomas? And every engine they see is Thomas.
Hey Joseph, can you tell me, do you really like steam trains?
Yes.
You do? How old are you?
5.
And you love steam trains? That's great. I loved them when I was 5, so... Yeah? And have you seen Thomas? Part of the attraction, of course, is the chance to ride in these beautifully restored carriages with their horsehair stuffed moquette and their mahogany panelling. Now, these youngsters are clearly enamoured by just such railway details. But over there, beyond that secret door at the end of the carriage, there's something even more glorious: a royal compartment. Queen Victoria was famously a big fan of the island and indeed maintained a modest country mansion near Cowes. Back in her day, the railway would collect her from the coast and deliver her cross-country to Osborne House. And it was in this very seat, or so it said, that she would enjoy the journey. We were not abused. If only Her Majesty could have seen the state to which this glorious rolling stock got after the line proper was axed in the 1960s, I think that certain railway executives would have gone to the Tower. These carriages are genuine Victorian designs and were sold off to become potting sheds and chicken coops. Now they're in the hands of restorers and about to undergo some serious rebuilding. Jim Lowe is one of them. Jim, is it really worth restoring old carriages like this?
Well, it certainly is. They're part of our heritage, and despite the condition of this one, as you will see, we make an excellent job of restoring them, and it's lovely to see our passengers remark on travelling as the Victorians did.
But when you rebuild something like this, which is clearly in quite bad condition at the moment, is what you get at the end, in a sense, brand new?
There's always a compromise for the simple reason that once timber has rotted, you cannot put it back. You have to replace it with like for like. But the incredible thing about most of these vehicles is that the actual framework, the teak or oak frame, is as good as the day it was put in. We were blessed with this plethora of Victorian carriages that had been put out to grass in the 30s when they were obsolete. And we're able to put them back.
And what sort of people originally bought these carriages as potting sheds and beach huts?
I imagine that at the time these were seen as an excellent way of acquiring a summer house or a shed or somewhere to change when you went on the beach. A whole variety of purposes that these were put to, but both for storage or, in some cases, people actually lived in them as holiday homes.
Beryl Bowen already had a nice house in the village of St Helens, but then Queen Victoria already had Balmoral. They both wanted their own railway carriage, and they were both ladies used to getting their way. Your grandfather bought them from the Southern Railway
for peanuts,
yes.
And then they were used, we had one as a tuck shop, because we had a camp up here, so one was really our residence across the road for the summer, sort of staying in the summer.
Railway carriage has got this wonderful timber cladding.
That was called the log cabin.
That's great.
Yes.
So you've nailed up some... What is this bit?
Elm boarding.
Elm. How nice. Elm.
Elm boarding.
So all sorts of people, Beryl, probably had these...
Oh, they're all over the island.
When your carriages finally went, were you...
Oh, well, I don't know.
Did you shed a tear?
No, I didn't really. I was pleased they'd gone in a way, because they were just wasting away there. And I thought, if there's anything worthwhile, the steam railway might as well have it. It seems silly for them just to rot there.
There were railways right across the island, weren't they? To Cowes, where you were born, to Freshwater,
yes.
To Newport,
That's
to
right.
Ventnor West,
yes.
to Ventnor, to Bembridge. There were... I mean, it's extraordinary, really. There were...
Yes.
Did you use them?
Oh, yes, you had to use them, really. The railways.
Yeah.
Well, because there wasn't such a good bus service, I suppose.
All right, these days there are buses, but it's still the land that time forgot. It's not just the pace of life or the fact that there isn't a fast food outlet every 100 metres, or rather yards, or that the ethnic minority is a bit too much of a minority. This is a pounds, shillings and pence sort of place, and in my opinion, not so bad. But being a little old-fashioned doesn't mean it has to be behind the times, of course, and those pounds, shillings and pence still have to add up. Railways only work when there are bottoms on seats. The dear old underground trains may look quaint, but they've got a job to do. This is why the 8.5 miles of Island Line succeeds where so many old railway routes have failed. It provides an essential service, bringing people here to ferries. Every day, commuters from across the island travel from here across to the mainland there, coming back each evening to what I consider to be this little slice of real Britain. Brian Hinton is one of them, back and forth to the mainland like a demented water beetle.
The shock of getting off a ferry, and then you get into, and you think, well, I've escaped the city, and there is a tube train waiting for you, and it takes you through all these little tunnels, and again, tube train that used to go through the grime of London, and there they are going through green fields and with glimpses of the sea,
Brian is one of the many hippies who came for the Isle of Wight Rock Festival in 1970 and fell in love with the place.
The Isle of Wight's always been about 30 years behind the culture on the mainland, so you really were when it now feels like the 50s. It was then probably in the time of Tennyson. Apart from a few cars, it hadn't really changed much, So yeah, it was a culture shock in every sense. Yeah.
You yourself have said that the island's quite a peaceful place. You cross the Solent and everything changes. Is that the real attraction of the place?
It's completely remote and beautiful. I love the landscape of the West Wight. It changes every day. I've always had a bolt hole on the mainland, so I've never lived on the Isle of Wight for good. I love London, but I come down and suddenly you're aware of all the colours and the sounds and the smell of seaweed and whatever, and a huge sense of peace. I get on that ferry and come to the island. You really feel all that sort of tension lifting.
Do you wish you were here? This island represents so much of the culture that we've lost in Britain now that we've gone for a kind of 24-hour corporate cappuccino world. But actually that's the very reason why so many people come here. They're very sort who like to collect Route Master buses and jigsaws and go on seaside holidays or create private collections of cast iron General Post Office pillar boxes. Now it's true that you have to get the balance right and that too much of a good thing is bordering on the unusual. But then the unusual, as opposed to the banal, is always something worth celebrating.
The Clueless meet the expert next on 4, Ruth Watson's Hotel Rescue.